A little peek behind the scenes, but the day I film is usually on Tuesday, which is the same day each new episode of Alien Earth launches, which has made it incredibly hard, almost impossible, for me to find a time that I can watch the show, think about it, script something, film it, and then put it up in a manner in which you might actually see it before the next episode releases. And as I'm sitting here filming, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to manage to post this on a Friday or if this is going to end up going up late on a weekend or maybe even end up with a double post for Monday, all of which I am not loving. But if you're wondering how I feel about this TV show so far, I love it and think it's so deep and interesting and fascinating that I really want to figure out a way to rework my schedule to make these episode by episode reviews work going forward. So here we are with the first mega review, Alien Earth episodes 1 through 4. In some ways I'm kind of glad that we're hitting it now because I have so much data and feedback. There were so many like false leads and things I thought were going one way and then they turn out another, that it kind of feels good to like have all the information here and really understand the setup before talking to you guys about it. That said, I just finished watching Alien Earth 4 and I have a couple of notes that I'm going to tack on to the categories I've already created based off of episodes 1 through 3. So that leaves me a little bit conflicted about where this video fits in catalog wise and with what I'm currently doing with these more thought out reviews, but here we are, we're gonna do it. I want you guys to know how much I love this show. Alien is one of my favorite all-time franchises. The original Alien is probably in my top 10 movies ever. It's like very close between that and The Thing. And I also am a really big fan of Alien 4, which I know is a controversial pull, but I think there's some great video there. There's really some extra interesting lore going on there, which is great because we're sort of going in that direction with this one too. I even have watched and rewatched Prometheus and Covenant, and while I'm not a huge fan of the end result of those two movies, there are individual moments and scenes in there that really stand out and interest me. And I think taking the franchise into a TV version, making it MA, and going in this direction with multi-aliens and exploring synths, kind of like drawing in some more of those Blade Runner aspects too, was really smart because there's definitely still like that huge unknown, not sure aspect to the aliens, which is something we really lost as the franchise has progressed because now we know the rules of the aliens, so it feels very frustrating when characters like stick their faces in front of the eggs and just stare forever. Especially if these characters are smarter scientists or whatever, which also this TV show has done some stuff to mitigate, but I'm getting way ahead of myself. Let's go ahead and break this down a little bit into some categories, starting with the visuals. In episode 1, they pretty much one-for-one recreate everything in the original Alien movie, like as far as the setup, the crew, how things function, which I know some people are going to find annoying because I think in the timeline this is before that Alien movie and far enough before it that people feel like there should be a change in technology, but here's my pitch for you. I don't care about continuity, I care about themes and aspects that we can explore in the Alien universe. To be honest with you, the Alien franchise is very convoluted at this juncture, and if it wasn't clear to you from my love for Alien 4 Resurrection, I don't necessarily care about continuity if you're doing interesting and intriguing things, because certainly based off of where we ended in Alien 3, Alien 4 cannot or should not exist because Ripley should be a bunch of ashes and there should be no DNA to pull. But I think making a clone of her, getting the Alien Queen, experimenting, seeing how that genetics has changed is so interesting, like her slightly acidic blood, her a little bit more animalistic sense of self and terms. All of that's really fun. I love Winona Ryder's character there. I'm having such a good time with the themes that they choose to explore, the different ways they take the aliens, the mystery that they brought back into the franchise in that movie by changing things up and making new rules for these genetically altered aliens. Like all of that works really well, adds that extra level of terror, creates like new avenues for the franchise to go. And I think that pulpy, comic, over-the-top kind of style, almost like comedic, scenery-chewing level we're getting from some of the actors just happens to be fun in the movie. This is a long, long way for me to circle back to the fact that I don't care about the continuity or the accuracy, and that grimy retro future aesthetic we get in the first episode that pulls me back to Alien 1 immediately connects this and makes me says, yes, this is part of the franchise. Yes, the people who took care of this really loved the original movie. They know what they're doing. They took the time to get every detail in the scenery, in the uniforms, even like the camera angles, the way the shots are panned. and correct. I love hearing those like iconic sounds and knowing we're in a new story. It's very exciting for me, and if you had asked me between watching episode 1 and episode 2, I would have been torn about whether or not this was a one-for-one plagiarism and like a member berries, or if this was an homage. But based off of where we've gone from the story and how far we've diverged from the original Alien, I really feel like this was more like a love letter and a promise that they are fans of the franchise, that they do see all the work that's come before them, they understand what makes this series so special and iconic, and they're going to preserve those elements for us as we go forward in a new direction. Which kind of rolls me into like the intros of all of these episodes just as a general what we're introducing and how we're doing exposition. The exposition in episode 1 on the ship is a little bit long, breaking down all of the companies and stuff and basically giving the viewer a history lesson. I didn't love how that was done, but I have to say now that we're in episode 4 and I'm getting to see some more interaction with the cyborg and whatnot, I feel like we get echoes of how he was acting in that first episode and how he's interacting with Slightly now here in episode 4. And that's all sort of like gave me indications of what a smooth operator he is, about his ability to seem trustworthy and kind, but also how he probably has like this overall coldness vibe and aspect that we have to watch out for, and in particular Slightly right now sort of like on the receiving end of. And then it kind of smash cuts us over into Neverland and we get another like long exposition dump on Prodigy, who that dude is, what he's doing, why he's doing it, so on and so forth, which again I didn't love, but I do feel like was a great way to sort of front load the information I needed to get going with the story. And I do really like Wendy. I like this concept of the AI children, and I have a lot more to talk about with that when we get to it. Also, I really enjoyed these hard cuts between like the Neverland aspect and the spaceship aspect. I like that we just took as rote that the aliens breached containment and that we crash landed on Earth. Part of me is like, we could do a whole movie that would basically be an homage to Alien, the original, just based off of that little cut episode. Part of me also wonders if there are other survivors in the crew, because we did spend a lot of time focusing on certain characters, like that one kind of weird pervy character. If we found out he was a synthetic and therefore survived, or if we just found out that he was also a cyborg and survived, that would be intriguing to me. You know, he's kind of wandering around and he loops back in later. It would also be sort of like interesting to find out exactly how they breached containment this time and to figure out how they acquired these aliens, because the old janitor dude sort of made allusions to the fact that there were severe casualties to get the specimens on board. You know, it could be part of its own standalone movie, or it could be something that we get in flashbacks later as it becomes relevant. I can't lie, there's part of me that's really interested in that and would love to see it, but also if we never get that, I'm not super heartbroken. Where we are with the story is fascinating enough, and I can see how they're kind of like lengthening the story out and sort of teasing us with its title, Alien Earth, because we crash land on Earth and I'm like, yes, the aliens are breaching containment. This is the thing that we have teased about in these sort of stories the whole time. Like the fear that these aliens would make it to Earth and decimate all life has pretty much been there since the original 4 movies in the franchise. Alien vs. Predator touches on it briefly, but they're on an island near the Arctic. I don't remember that movie super well, but I think there wasn't really a good way for the alien to like expand its universe out past that island. Episode 2, we get just the briefest taste of the alien interacting with the public, and it's cool. It's what you sort of like expect, it just tearing through bodies, people being incapable of stopping it and being horrified and scared and just dying gruesome deaths all over the place. It really earns its TVMA rating in this one. But then episode 3 does a hard turn and moves us along very quickly into the next phase of the story. Part of me was sad because I really wanted to see the alien, you know, just free roam across the Earth, and now that we've got it like recontained and put it on an island, we're in another like Alien vs. Predator isolated on the island scenario. Although Alien 4 Resurrection did show us these creatures are very strong swimmers, so perhaps not as isolated in a tropical island as they were in an Arctic one. And then like the flip side of me really loves what we're doing here with Alien 3, because we do get to see that Wendy can very easily kill these aliens. It's not that big fuss or muss. We get to see what happens when smart, intelligent people who know the rules of the alien are in charge, and we put only synthetics face to face with them so there can't be any mess ups. And you do get to see that you maybe could contain them, maybe could experiment with them. I mean, I'm sure things are about to go horribly wrong in this horror TV show. It's going to be wrong in different and interesting ways. It's going to be about the greed. It's going to be about someone doing something to sabotage something. It's not going to be because these people were too stupid to live, which is a huge issue I think we have with this series going into Prometheus and Covenant. You know, it's especially cool because there were some hints that there's something more nefarious, more dangerous going on in this Neverland Island that wasn't fully explored or expressed yet. We were just seeing like cleanup or like some kind of freezing or maybe like some washing away of blood. Like, I don't know what the guy in the suit was doing, but we keep seeing him in this kind of grimy hallway. We see the synth kids walk by them and like not really reacting to whatever this person's doing, so it must be fairly normal to them. And now we know that's like a full security lab and we're throwing this extra wild alien element into the mix, but it does kind of make me wonder, like, what else are they doing in the lab? It can't be just for these synth kids. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And I'm also wondering if like that extra third wild card of what else they were doing, if that's still in process, how does that play with the aliens? They keep talking about how Prodigy is like on the cusp of announcing its next big thing. It's dropped like all this money into. The audience has sort of been led to believe that what they're talking about is these synth AI children, maybe the ability to move people over into synths. That might not be what they're referring to. It might be this other weird project that's happening that requires all this extra containment. Because certainly from my perspective, it feels like they're very far away from launching the AI synth kids. They can't even put an adult into the synth body. They can only do it with children. And it's been a couple months, so we don't even know how that affects their development, whether or not they're actually able to go on and be immortal or whatnot. And I don't necessarily even see them doing work to see if they could map an adult mind and then put them into a synth body or whatever. Maybe they're not at that phase in the project. Maybe they never intended it. Certainly Cavalier, the head of the Prodigy company, says that he's only doing this so he can have someone to talk to, or maybe so that like these kids can have that childlike wonder, ability to create, and all the power to do so. That's gonna like drive his company to the next level. But at this juncture, it doesn't necessarily seem like this is a scientific for the public thing. It sort of feels like he's done this partially for his own entertainment and partially to create like this mind trust of people who are collectively gonna like springboard his company. I do actually have a lot of notes about the static Wendy hears and whether or not that's like her sensing her brother or her talking to the aliens, but episode 4 breaks that down very succinctly for us and tells us that that's about Wendy talking to the aliens. I like where we're going with it based off of what happens in episode 4, but I don't love it from a plot point like, why can she do this and nobody else? They have like a one-off line like she was chosen by the aliens, but this suggests a very high level of intelligence. And again, I have to ask, why Wendy? Is it because she was like more emotionally available because she's keeping tabs on her brother, so it shows that she has loyalty and interest to things outside of this immediate group? Is it because she was already sort of like controlling some of the security cameras and hacking into some things, so that like made her more available to the aliens than the other kids were, who seemed to sort of still be dealing with the transition to their new bodies and possibly dealing with like being isolated as they are? Certainly in episode 4 we get a little bit look with all of the different children, and she doesn't seem to be the one who's making the most use of her ability to learn and upload things. Arguably the scientific character who now wants to go by the name Isaac is making the most use of his ability to like insta-learn and then apply those skills, and possibly the girl who's super competitive and is all like, I learned French, maybe is going to be like the mega upload person who just keeps uploading projects and trying to get more information and growing and expanding to be the favorite. You know, by contrast to these two, Wendy kind of seems like a boring pick here. We haven't done a lot to establish her as more than just like this girl. I suppose it's possible that there's something in her specific unique brain structure and pattern that made her more susceptible and able to communicate with the aliens than any of the other kids. I don't really know, and I don't like that element of it, like the randomness, the like coincidence of it all. That said, seeing her interact with the aliens, seeing her sort of care about the aliens, like have this friendship and bonding with them is kind of cool. It is ultra creepy for her to be in front of her brother's removed lung and watch that thing burst out at the end of episode 4 and like be friends with it. In fact, in episode 3 when they pulled that lung out, first I thought it was because the lung was was damaged, and then they hooked it up and put the alien in it. I thought they took his lung just for that reason. And then I found out in episode 4 they put an artificial lung in there, which is why I'm sort of glad that I waited till episode 4 to talk about this, because I had a long rant about the body horror of all of that, and like a concern about whether or not they'd put that lung back into him with the alien in it, which I guess you can walk and chew gum. At the same time, he could have had that lung damaged and needed a replacement. He was pretty badly hurt in episode 3, and they could repair that lung and then connect it up and use it for this experiment purpose while giving him a new one. I do have some concerns about the alien inconsistencies. I love the variation of aliens we're getting. Like, that eyeball thing is super creepy. Even like the blood slugs that like hook on and drain all your blood out and are just like fat and on the floor are pretty scary. The fact that we have so many different specimens, I don't know the rules of them, I don't know how smart they are, I don't know what their gimmick is yet, is great for a horror TV show. Brings me back to that original wonder, that original fear and terror. The fact that we've sort of like isolated it onto an island like this, and we've established that the people on the island cannot leave because they're all part of like a classified program, and I guess they'd have a bunch of NDAs, there's not a way off or something going on there, is kind of helpful because it's a little bit like recreating the spaceship, there's nowhere else for you to go, claustrophobia kind of aspect, and there's already a ton of really dangerous stuff on the island. The synth children themselves have shown that they can be dangerous. If there's another project that we don't know about yet, it appears to be breaching containment and dangerous all the time, because otherwise why is that guy always in a hazmat suit cleaning or like containing in some way? Bringing the aliens into the mix like a dangerous third combination is fun. And I appreciate that there is a delicate balance going on here, balancing the aliens and the synth, because like you can't show too much of the alien, it loses its fear factor, but there is some sort of like weirdness going on in the show where it seems more like the theming is around human mortality or human evolution into like its next phase, as explored through turning people into cyborgs, making straight up AI synths, or making these hybrid synths we're seeing. And with a heavy emphasis on this versus the alien, I was a little concerned like the alien aspect would get lost in the sauce. And you know, I am really not trying to be a stickler to like the rules that have been established previously in the franchise. If it's new and interesting, I want to do it, but I do want there to be a good explanation for it. So I was a little surprised in episode 3 when the big xenomorph was killed so easily by Wendy. I know she incurred damage, I know her brother almost died, but like she went in there, she got locked in a room, and she like sliced that guy in the middle with a paper cutter. Like, yes, she's a strong synth or whatever, but like the acid blood, the like savagery of the alien, I just feel like we didn't necessarily explore that as fully as we could have or should have, and was concerned because usually they're quite powerful. As it was, I noted at the end of episode 2 when the alien steals her brother Hermit and like lays a trap for her that's not like anything we've seen in the franchise so far, and it really turns the aliens from being like these monsters, these biological weapons, into like potentially a species all their own that has plans and thoughts and like moves in a more intelligent design kind of way than we originally have ever seen in this series. I'm somewhat curious to see where it goes, but I also am like sitting here questioning why we've never seen this kind of behavior from aliens before. And in fact, I have a lot of complaints about the alien that we saw in episode 1 and 2 because he was very quick with the kills, massacred a whole room, and then abducted Hermit. Also, I know the cyborg said that the alien didn't kill him because the alien goes after fear, but we just have the cyborg's word on that, and I'm wondering if it has more to do with the fact that the cyborg is like half synthetic and the aliens have no interest in synthetics, like they only want biological material. To that end, I'm not really sure what the alien wanted with Wendy, if it was trying to separate her so it could communicate with her. The whole scene where she kills that alien is very weird. First, that it tried to lure her away using Hermit. Second, that it didn't hurt her brother in any way, shape, or form. Third, like when they're facing off at the container entry and the alien doesn't charge at them or try to lure them out, it like jumps on top. I kind of wonder like what was it doing and what would it have done if Wendy hadn't like stabbed up through the roof and got it to start doing the acid blood situation. And Kirsch is giving me strong David vibes. It feels like he can't directly attack Boyd Cavalier, and as a result of that, he has to warn him about the aliens. He has to like try and make the lab safe and secure. But the fact that he's listening in on Slightly's conversation with the cyborg and hasn't actually like interrupted it, and the fact that he seems like really pleased that Wendy and the new alien are developing some kind of relationship, seems to imply to me that he likes the alien in the same kind of obsessive way that David did. Perhaps this is even a fault in AI's, period. You know, like they are always looking for the superior top predator or like the thing that's gonna survive and be the next evolution. And as a result of all of this, he values the aliens more than he values humans. Also, like, Boyd Cavalier doesn't treat Kirst very well, so like there's no need for him to have any more loyalty to that guy than whatever they've programmed him to have. And this is a fun callback to Blade Runner because Blade Runner and the Alien universe overlap a little bit in the movie franchises, and it would be really cool if like part of the reason we're always hunting down the replicants and trying to keep them from like malfunctioning or whatever is because they spend enough time around humans and they sort of start to like resent and hate them and like look for ways around their orders and the laws that are implemented against them to like get back at humanity. And that's kind of what Kirst is doing here. There's part of me that's really hoping out of all the humans, the bald security lawyer is the first one to go because he's so fucking mean to everybody. Like the synths, and he's sort of abrupt with Boyd Cavalier, and he's really mean to Herman. The end of episode 4 does seem to imply that Slightly is going to abduct Peter and use him to incubate the alien, but it would be so much better if he used the lawyer guy. Which rolls me into a couple of themes we're exploring. First and foremost is going to be immortality. Episode 1 gives us a script at the top that's kind of explaining that. Very strongly leaning into the Prometheus storyline. And I've got to tell you, I don't find immortality in and of itself to be a super exciting topic, nor do I really care about humanity and legacy in a way that a lot of people seem to, and that we continually see explored in both sci-fi and fantasy. But it does seem like we're at that cusp of evolution and trying to figure out how to extend our lives past our biomechanics. And we're looking at it in the 3 main ways I've already outlined: the cyborg, creating synthetic life, or doing some kind of hybrid scheme. Of these, the most interesting to me is the cyborg, because I am wondering, like, are we just leveling up what a human can do, making the cyborg have like all those multi-tools, I guess making him stronger and faster? Or is this actually extending his life in some way, shape, or form? I don't see the synth as a form of immortality personally. I think about it like that company Replica. And one of the main reasons Replica was originally created was because the founder wanted to create like an AI that sort of resembled a friend who had passed abruptly, and they like fed that person's text through them so that that AI would become more like their friend. I think all that is gross. I don't think that helps with the grieving process. You haven't like resurrected your friend. This isn't like some way to continue them forward. This series seems to be taking a close look at the synth-human hybrid, specifically with the children. And I think a main point of contention that we're all wondering and clearly gets spelled out for us in episode 4, is the synthetic being a continuation of that sickly child? Did we just map someone's brain, put it in here, and it's like a program that's attempting to create an evolution like this? If we do assume that we successfully mapped the child's brain and moved it over and there was no loss of continuity, the being that was human is now in the synth, there's some further questions about what it really means to be human, because these synth bodies can do so much more than a human body can, both in like a learning and processing capacity, but in like a strength, speed, agility, vision, and hearing kind of way too, where like we have to ask if a being that's so far above us is still human. You know, for me that's a pretty interesting question, partially because like the spectrum of humanity's ability to do that, just to start, ranges, and we struggle with that and seeing everyone at every level human and treating them with dignity. So if we do start creating these synth-human hybrids and they're like this huge jump in ability, you know, there's the potential for superiority to come in there, and there's the potential for humanity as a whole, to not really see them as humans and more like godlike multi-figures as well. And then on top of that, in episode 1, we talk about how emotions are partially like a brain chemistry thing, and the synths don't have that. So they're not really feeling emotions. It's very hard to get a grasp on what that means. Like, it's said in this one-off line, but then they talk about how they're trying to compensate for that by giving them some sort of chemical feedback loop that's sort of kind of similar. What would it mean if we got rid of all of the chemicals? Would they stop feeling and having emotions? Is that purely a biochemical interface? Can you even be human without those emotions expressed in that way? And the replacements they're attempting to do in these synths, how effective are they? How good is the mimicry? Does mimicking something instead of having the authentic self like matter? The fact that we only get one copy of each of these kids, I think, is the show's way of kind of like pushing us into believing that there is like a continuity between the human body and this new synth body. Because if you could map this brain and put it in several different robot kids, then they would do that, and they would just acknowledge that they're all copies, and then they could experiment on them. One of them they're raising could be very robot and synth-like. They could have no like synthetic chemicals or whatever and just treat them as like a purely synth being. Another one they could treat as ultra human and have very high cocktail levels of all these chemicals and like coddling and stuff to sort of simulate what it would be like to be human as much as possible in this new synth body and see how that goes. The third one could do some kind of middle road self-determination kind of path and see what this being chooses to do of their own free will and what the outcome is. I would leave the original child alive too. Like, to me, there's no reason mapping their brain system should kill the kid. And I would leave that sort of like as a control, observing their emotional, cognitive, everything as much as possible and trying to factor out how the disease is impacting them to see like what the human would do, which one of these 3 models is as close to that human as possible, or if none of them are that close, or what's going on. The fact that it doesn't seem like we can have several different robots all with the same brain scan in them seems to imply that there is a continuity between the human and that robot, and therefore there can only be one. I am kind of an optimistic person. I always prefer the most optimistic read, so I've chosen to read it as a continuation, whether or not that's true. I see the argument that like the loss of consciousness between the human body and into the robot body, this is a simulacrum, it's not the original, and you've killed the original to make this fake one. And I'm fine with that reading. I don't really have an argument for it because there's no way to know, because we can't contact anyone who's died. So we can't like prove or disprove that we ultimately killed this kid. But you know, I watch Star Trek and I believe you can transport from the ship to the planet and you're the same person there. So I'm gonna give this the same kind of pass and read it that way. Which does mean we have to talk about the fact that these are children in adult bodies now. Which I sort of assumed we did so that we didn't have to deal with child actors. But I think there's a little bit more going underneath the surface here, because while I don't agree with the child soldier aspersion, I don't think that comparison is apt. Just because like if you read anything about child soldiers and how they have been implemented historically, I don't feel like this is that. It's not like a good one-to-one comparison. It does sort of show that Boyd Cavalier doesn't really care about these kids. Forgets or doesn't understand what it means to be a child versus like what facing this level of danger is. Maybe he just figures because they're a synth and they can't be hurt, it's fine. But he hasn't like trained them not to feel fear or anything. Most of them haven't even been in these synth bodies for a full year yet. You would have human habits and human fears and worries and concerns, and it would take you some time to really understand and adjust to the fact that doesn't impact you anymore, if ever. There are some things that people can't train out of themselves. You know, I am afraid of spiders, but my thing is, as long as they're not touching me and they can't touch me, I'm fine with it. But as soon as they get on me, I'm freaked out. I can't imagine how long it would take to condition me out of that if like somehow you found a way to make it so the spider could never bite or hurt me even when it was like touching me. And that's like a mild dislike. Lots of people are so scared of spiders they can't even look at them like on a video screen or have them like in the same room nearby as them. Just freaks them out too much. You have to imagine with kids like that kind of like big emotion and intensity is even more so. Now what that means in these synth bodies where apparently they're not producing the right like hormone and chemical compounds to feel emotions at that intensity level is a whole nother direction that I think the show is a little irresponsible for bringing up when they're I'm not going to directly tackle it, but it is so interesting to me that I can't let that one single line go. And I'm continually wondering, how much are they feeling anything? Or like, is this some kind of pre-programmed pattern response from them? And I guess from that aspect, if you don't look at them as children or beings, you just look at them as an experiment, I can sort of see why Boyd Cavalier throws them into this kind of scenario, because you would wonder, like, would you fall into these patterns even though these things can't hurt you? Would you snap out of them? How would you respond to things? Just generally. And watching the Lost Boys respond in different ways to this fairly traumatic experience of being trapped with all these aliens and seeing all this stuff and stuff is pretty interesting too. It seems like they're going in a lot of different directions, none of which say to me doesn't have emotions anymore, but it does feel like some of them have slightly altered emotions, some of them are feeling like way too much, way too intensely, while some of them seem like entirely disinterested. If you did want to go somewhere with the whole like child soldier thing though, I think the closer thing would actually be child grooming here, because the Prodigy Company and Boyd Cavalier as a whole is using these children specifically for something he does want something from. They are being exploited and groomed to think that's okay or normal or to go along with their own exploitation. We see how like the one girl who wants to be his favorite and isn't is sort of being groomed into like this competitiveness and this animosity towards Wendy, as well as like directed to keep learning and keep pushing herself and her own limitations. How interested Wendy is or isn't in communicating with the aliens, or like how seriously she would take that task, sort of gets sidebarred because Boyd dangles her brother in front of her and is like, you'll never see him again unless you agree to play ball and do what I want. And that sort of drives Wendy to be more interested and involved with the aliens than maybe she would be otherwise. The fact that like they use Wendy originally as a test subject, she's successful, and then she sort of like leads the kids into this path of exploitation and transition into the adult Lost Boys body is one way that we classically see like child trafficking and child grooming happening, like taking one child, indoctrinating them and using them to lure other children in and sort of like set them at ease and then letting them be exploited. Perhaps like one of the most classic ways we're seeing child grooming take place on the show right now is between Slightly and the cyborg. The way the cyborg is like going back and forth between being friendly and inviting and playing on Slightly's better nature, playing on his desire to be moral and good, and then like finding like vulnerable, weak information from him and pressing on that to sort of force Slightly to do as he wants and force him to keep quiet or like his whole family will die. Very classic like groomer abuse behavior. Another thing that's thematically interesting to me is just the whole corporate globalization angle. The fact that corporations pretty much run the entire US government, probably a lot of other world governments too, but I don't want to make that claim because I'm not as familiar with other government status as I am my own home country. But to take it a step further and have the corporations overthrow the governments and just take over on their own and be the new way they rule the world adds a level of transparency to the issue that makes it easier for us to explore. I think it's particularly ironic that Disney is the one who's putting this out, who's created this, and like they're a conglomerate that's literally eating everything. They are the major corporation warring with other corporations and forcing mergers. There's like an irony in them greenlighting the show and the show sort of being about that I can't quite get over. And maybe it's because I watched the first two episodes of this and the new 2025 War of the Worlds so closely together. There's this parallel there where like Disney has correctly identified that people think corporations rule the world and that they're cruel and uncaring and only capital based and that they cause humanity to suffer and we're horror for their control. They take that and they implement it into this sci-fi horror accurately and well. And on the other side, Amazon is like a corporation thinking about how important data sets are to them and how scary it would be if some aliens came down from space and collected all of our data. And they do this confused metaphor where they take the aliens from War of the Worlds that were originally really horrifying and scary, just make them into like a corporation's worst nightmare and not actually all that dangerous to humanity at all. In both occasions, it's like a corporation correctly identifying things that people are concerned about and then executing in wildly different manners to try and like implement that into a horror sort of scenario. But there's just like this cognitive dissonance in both cases where the corporation or like whoever is running the creative department and helping pitch these ideas, but also fully involved in this corporate culture and therefore like aware of all these larger background things and are sort of like infusing it into the art. Like there's just this cognitive dissonance. You know, in Amazon's case, they entirely missed the mark with War of the Worlds and the data-eating aliens. But here in Disney, even though this is on the money, the horror, the fact that they are the evil corporation, like they are Prodigy, they are Wayland Yutani, they are the big conglomerate like weighing on our back and pushing us down. I don't know how to circle that square, but it is fascinating to me. Element of like the corporate personality or soul or whatever is like infused into the art that they're now releasing. It's like creepy and grotesque and all kinds of like weirdness for me. And like lastly, I cannot let go of the scorpion we see in the first episode. How exactly that scorpion is gonna play in, or like that conversation between Kirsch and Wendy, I'm still not sure, but I am even more strongly convinced here in episode 4 that it's highly relevant. You know, part of me is wondering if perhaps the kids, specifically Wendy, learn this lesson about the scorpion too well and identify with the alien and like want to protect it in the same way that Kirsch is like trying to protect the scorpion. Or maybe this is like a lesson from Kirsch that he sort of sees all living beings as equal and like just not on his level, not a threat to him, but also like there's no priority in keeping humans alive and healthy versus keeping the scorpion alive and healthy, and we'll see that play out with the alien. There certainly are like some visual similarities between a fully grown xenomorph and a scorpion. Obviously the alien is like terrifying and a scorpion's just like a little guy or whatever, but there's enough aspects of similarity, especially for a child that can't really be harmed by either, that I can see them connecting these two lessons in their head. I also wonder if the way we're treating the scorpion like it's just an animal and it's got basic needs and wants is like another way to demystify the whole alien. At the end of the day, this alien is a biological creature. It's got things that are driving it, and if we knew what those things were, we could control it or understand it or like create a containment field that takes all that into account. However, there's also a part of me that can't help but think of the old adage about the scorpion and the frog, which is not referenced at all in the TV show, but the basic adage, if you've never heard it before, is like there's rain in the desert, it's flooding everything. The scorpion is stuck on one side and wants to get across to the other, like, and it'll drown in the water and die if it stays in place. So it talks to the frog and asks it to carry it, and the frog's like, no bro, you'll sting me and I don't want to die, you know, sucks to be you. And the scorpion is like, please, I promise I won't sting you, please, please, please. And the frog takes pity on it and lets the scorpion get on its back, and then it takes the scorpion to the other side to safety where it can survive. And as soon as it makes it to the other side, the scorpion stings it. And the frog is like, whoa, you promised not to do that. Why did you kill me? And the scorpion's like, it's in my nature. I think that's such a common adage and such like a common knowledge story that anytime you see a scorpion on screen, it's worth asking who the betrayer is going to be. What is the scorpion here? What are we trusting, letting in, choosing to befriend? And then how or when is it going to sting us? Obviously, I think the xenomorph is the scorpion, but it's possible that maybe Cursed is the scorpion, maybe one of these synth hybrids of the scorpion. I could even see us coming to find out that Hermit is the scorpion, right? Like right now, he seems to believe that Wendy is his sister. And FYI, I love that he accepted that like right off the dome. We didn't have to do some kind of prove yourself sort of montage. But I do wonder with her talking to the alien and like sort of separating herself from him and becoming slightly estranged, if that's going to damage their relationship. And Hermit is a medic by trade. He looks after humanity. He wants to take care of things. And if like her synth identity and her being able to do all these things and having these extra capacities is gonna hit an uncanniness and make him feel like she is dangerous to him or to humanity as a whole, and that's gonna be like him rejecting her. All I know for certain is that Alien Earth is very gory. It's visually a feast. Like I haven't watched something that is so beautiful and interesting and dynamic in a very long time. And granted, I don't watch a lot of things, but it's so clever. There's so many little things you could point out. Like I could do a whole separate hour-long, 2-hour-long video on all the little details I'm seeing and what that could mean. And even with this like quick review, I have not touched everything. Certainly, I'm very interested in the one character that was traumatized by like the eyeball trying to get into her eye, and now her deciding that she's pregnant and gonna have a baby. I'm curious what a level 3 containment is. I'm curious what happens to her, what we'll see. Lucy. There's just so much going on. They're doing such a good job giving each one of the Lost Boys some individual time and making them go on their own separate arc, and like really taking them from being this group and making them all interesting dynamic characters in their own. I cannot wait for episode 5 to release, and I can't believe that seasons are so short now. That'll officially put me at the halfway mark. But talk to me in those comments down below. Are you watching Alien Earth? And if so, what are your impressions so far? If you've got this far, leave me a spaceship emoji. And as always, keep reading.